Hello everyone, welcome to the CG Cookie live stream. I believe I've got everything set up correctly. Give me a thumbs up or tell me, press 1 if it's working, I guess. I see that there's still requests for like an intro theme song and apparently like smoke machines and lights and craziness, but it's just me in my humble little office, here to teach you some Blender the best I can. But it's great to see you all. I think we're going to have a fun stream. It's going to be a long one. We are going to be texturing this airplane. Awesome, thank you. Looks like we're good. We're going to be texturing this airplane that should be familiar to you. If you remember, let me show you. It comes from this course from Jonathan Williamson, the Introduction to Hard Surface Modeling. So it's a kind of a classic CG Cookie course. And the other day, Jonathan Gonzalez was like, hey, has anyone ever textured this before? I'd like to use it in a game project. And I was like, no, we haven't. So we absolutely should. Although Simon, you said you've textured this before. So you have. But no one on our team has done it. And so thought it was a good idea. I thought it was a great excuse to explore some of Blender's texturing tools, especially in 2.8. So that's why we're here today. It's not going to be a short stream. This is probably going to be a full 2 hours. We're taking the plain gray model where we'll be UV texturing, UV laying out some things, and then texturing by hand, a little bit of procedural stuff. It's going to be everything. And what I'm particularly excited about with this workflow is what Eevee brings to the table, the ability to texture some of these parts in real time. Like, for example, we're going to paint the airplane, and then we're going to start scratching away some of the paint. And Eevee allows us to scratch and see the actual real-time results. Whereas like with Cycles, I would paint a black and white scratch map, for example, and then plug it in after the fact. Now it's fun to actually see it happen in real time, thanks to Eevee. So did I get a haircut? I think a week or two ago I did. It was fairly recent, yes. Awesome. So, I mean, that's kind of it. We'll just dive right in since it will be a lot happening. You can download this plane from the source files, and I mean, if you want to follow along, I guess you could, but if you want to do this on your own time, absolutely you can. And don't hesitate to ask questions because I will be covering a lot. So if you need any clarification, I'm happy to do that. So with this, I am using the latest version of Blender that is from yesterday, I guess. So it's hopefully we won't run into any deal breakers. But one thing that is different is the tool bar at the top is changing. And I have to admit, I'm a little bit sore about that because I got so used to it for like 9 months. I wasn't like necessarily the biggest fan of it at the beginning, but I got so used to it, and now it's changed. Most of the tools are found over here in the in panel. So in 2.79, it was over here on the left, and then it went to the top bar, and now it's going to be on the right. But I was talking to Lampel about it yesterday, and what's kind of silly is if we jump into sculpt mode, for example, let's see. Like, yeah, you can turn on dynamic topology from the sculpt menu. You can turn it on from over here in the right in panel, and then you can also turn it on in the like tool settings. So like if I click sculpt, I can literally turn the same setting on in 3 different places, which is, I don't know, I think they're working it out. It's not a final process, but being so late in development, I was a little disappointed that we're making this big of a change. But anyway, as if I'm doing anything, but they are making this big of a change. Anyway, I don't want to complain. I want to just get right into it. But that being said, I scheduled this stream when I was very used to the top bar workflow, and now I just gotta figure out how to do it in the in panel. Shouldn't be too big of a deal. Awesome. And the way I like to start with texturing is I want to find it with an object like this, a model like this. There's several parts, and so I want to find any parts that can be simply textured with just like a simple procedural material. And start to eliminate things that don't need UV texturing, for example. So the cockpit enclosure, the glass enclosure, is a great example. I don't really need to paint textures for it. It's just select the object, add a material, a simple glass material. So I've got it selected. I'll hit the new material button, and we will call this cockpit glass. And then I also want to get used to these tabs up here. Some people have noticed that I don't use them very often. I've started using them in recent weeks. I usually end up finding myself tweaking them anyway, but since we're starting to deal with shading, let's jump over to the shading tab and see how that works for us. So it enables look dev mode, which is fun. That's helpful. And so we've created our cockpit glass material. All I need to do for this is turn off, what do I need to turn off? I need to turn on transmission all the way up to 1. You'll see that we start to get some transparency, but the roughness value, which I don't quite understand, the roughness for our specularity is what's controlling that. So if we go down to like 0.01, it gets much clearer. However, there's transmission roughness, which seems to do nothing. You would expect the clarity to deal with that. But anyway, what we will see is that there's actually a cockpit underneath the glass, but we don't see that through the transmission by default. We have to enable that for Eevee and in the material. Question from Omar, what are those 2 orbs in the lower right for? So these are called, I think, shader spheres. They used to be called shader balls, maybe, and there was some controversy about that. But Pablo in his stream from yesterday said that they have updated that to be spheres, I think. Anyway, this is just to show, I think, like give you some real-time feedback in what your environment light is. So you can select a different HDR world, and that will update there. And you can kind of see what it looks like in a chrome ball, and also see what it looks like in a diffuse white surface. Sorry, I just said ball. Apparently we can't say that. But this is kind of common. You'll see render tests posted online with people like doing an environment scene and then putting a chrome ball, putting a white sphere in the scene just to kind of demonstrate what the lighting situation is. So that's kind of what they're there for. You can turn them off if you want. They are, look dev preview is where you can turn that on and off. But that's just kind of there by default, so I'll leave it for now. And yeah, so what I was doing is turning on refraction for screen space in Eevee. And you have to first, well, I'm just going to first do it in the material itself. So in the node, in the in panel of the shader editor, we can scroll down until we see screen space refraction. So I'm going to enable that, and we won't see anything because in addition, I need to go to the Eevee render settings and turn on screen space reflections and then refraction that's under the reflections. So after all that, now we finally have some refraction happening. But that's not really what it's not looking too great, is it? It looks a little bit too much like a water droplet. It doesn't look like clear glass. If we look at the structure of this glass, it should work fine because we have a little bit of thickness. You know, it's not like paper thin. So that should be okay. Maybe we need to adjust the index of refraction at 0.45. What if I start taking it down? Okay, we can see what that does. It's like the refraction kind of shrinks and we get this gap. But if I make the gap start to line up with the edge, I think that's going to be a pretty believable kind of look. Index of refraction up to about there. And what does look a little bit weird is we've got the refraction through the glass, but we don't see the actual world around us. And that's just a limitation or a feature, however you look at it, of the look dev viewport. Whereas if I turn on scene world, now right now we don't have one, so let's create one. In the world tab, let's add an environment texture, and I will go grab an HDRI from HDRI Haven. I have one that I like. This one right here, the symmetrical garden. So now we can get a more full comprehensive idea of what the shader is looking like now that we can see what is being refracted. And so I think this glass looks pretty good, looks pretty believable. We can tell that it's refracting, but we also don't want it to be like a solid glass object, which has, you know, much wilder refractions. Interestingly, though, the index of refraction being at 0.98 is kind of strange because I think a value of 1 is like air. And so I want to say like 1.3 or 1.4, maybe 1.5 actually, now that I'm thinking about it, is like typical glass, and that does not look good. Like that's not what I expect. So I'm kind of, I don't know if there's something with the settings that's not working that well, but I just kind of manually turn it down to 0.97, I think. Yeah, so that's going to be fine. I'm going by looks here. I'm not going by scientific, expectations or values that we all know. So anyway, all that to say that the glass, that's a simple object that I can add a material to and exclude it from the hand-painted texture collection. Only other thing I'll do is take the base color up all the way to white so that you can see that it's a little bit dark. If you go down below white, it starts to get like a darkened kind of glass. So I want it to be fully clear all the way up to 1. And then I'm going to hide that because that's one object off the list. I think I saw a question. Omar, is that LookDev Eevee? Yeah, LookDev is an Eevee. It's a implementation of Eevee. It's kind of interesting though because like you can have LookDev on if I've got cycles enabled. I'm still in LookDev, and this is Eevee. This is Eevee, and so I could texture paint in Eevee, and this is where Eevee's like gaining some ground in the workflow as being like an intermediate tool. So I can like texture and do what I said earlier, like paint scratches in real time. But then if my final renders will be in cycles, I can switch over to render mode, and that's going to be cycles. So you know, the LookDev mode specifically is a version of Eevee, but it's not like rendering with Eevee. See what I mean? Like if you press render, well, if I turn off scene world and I press render, probably won't give me anything because I don't have a camera. Anyway, like you won't see this. What you see when you'll render is this. All right. Same things when you're working with Eevee, you'll see this. So I think that's fairly clear. It's an Eevee limitation. The engine has trouble seeing a transparent surface behind another transparent surface. So a hollow glass bubble like that gives it a little trouble. Okay, gotcha. So that's why the index of refraction isn't what isn't the value I expected, I suppose. All right. That was kind of a long explanation about like my goal in the beginning of this texturing process is just to select objects and add simple materials that don't need the more extensive workflow of hand painting textures and laying out UVs. So going into the cockpit. Now, I'm not going to focus on the cockpit that much. Like my final renders, as you could see, I had it, where was it? Maybe layout. Yeah. Like my final render is going to be something like this. It's going to be outside. It's not going to be in the cockpit. So I don't need to like spend a lot of time in the cockpit. So I don't want to waste time in the complexity because there's a lot of pieces here. A lot could be laid out, a lot could be textured individually, and I don't want to spend that time because I'm not going to focus on it ultimately. So it makes a great candidate for, I think I switched, I'm going to try and stay in shading. It makes a good candidate for adding simple procedural materials. I thought there were 2 big buttons, Eevee and cycles. I don't know about the big buttons. It's just a drop down as far as I know. Oh, maybe you're talking about going from these 2 buttons. Anyway, for the cockpit, you know, I'm thinking that just a simple metallic material will work to represent like a stainless steel sort of construction. So I'm going to add a new material. I've got these little side panels selected. Let's add new material and call it, let's just call it metal. Simple enough. Maybe we can use it other places. Just a baseline metal material. I will create that, and to get to a metallic look, let's increase, you can turn specularity off, turn metallic all the way up. Now we've got reflections, but the default roughness at 0.5 is too high. How about 0.2? That's looking a little bit more like chrome, which I don't want. How about 0.3? Still a little more like chrome. Maybe 0.4? And then I think the base color is a little too high. We want it to be a little bit darker. It also doesn't help that the whole plane is this very bright white color. So I'm going to trust that these settings I've established are good enough for now. It's looking a little too bright, a little too chromish, but I think part of that is due to all the reflections are being white due to the plane, the default like non-material plane. So I'm just going to continue adding that metal material to other objects, and I can always come back and make sure that this is what I want it to be later once the plane has its proper texture. All right, so we've got that. The airplane body itself, I think I'll make the interior right here. Just what I'm doing is selecting an edge loop at the bottom of the cockpit chamber, and then control plussing to grow my selection. And I know that I need one material for the paint itself, the plain exterior. It's all part of the same mesh, so I need 2 material slots. The first one will be for like will be there to accept the material in the future. But for now, since it's a secondary material, I will add the metal to the second slot and then choose assign. Oh, I'm in whoops, whoa. I'm not in look dev anymore. There we go. Now you can see that the cockpit is assigned. And right away, not reflecting so much white, our metal looks better. So that white was definitely affecting it negatively. But let's see, any other objects in here that can have a metal material? This one. Now we need perhaps the middle of the, what do you call it? Joystick? Is that what you call a cockpit thing? I'm going to do the same sort of thing where we add 2 material slots. I think the handle and the, I want to call it like a gasket. I don't know if that's correct, but this piece down here is going to be rubber, a black type of rubber. Control stick, that makes sounds a little better. And I'm going to add 2 material slots. The first one is going to be for the rubber material that I just mentioned. So new, we'll call it black, or we'll call it rubber black, just in case I'm making another rubber. Maybe it's a good time to talk about how I'm naming these materials, because I've got metal, and when I was rehearsing, I called it cockpit metal, because I want to sort of like organize the names of the materials by where they will be on the object. So I'm working on the cockpit, and a lot of these materials will not go other places. So if that's the case, I will add cockpit _ name of the material, so that they're all kind of, when I look at the list, they're all kind of grouped together. However, the metal, I know that I will be able to use it down here for these little supports that the wheels, the axles for the wheels. So I can add the metal there. And because it's outside of the cockpit, there's no reason to add that prefix. However, the black rubber, I'm looking at the airplane again. I don't think it will, we want the tires to probably be black as well, but that will be hand painted. It'll have some hand painted elements. So I'm just going to, I'm going to leave it, I'll call it cockpit rubber actually. Rubber black. And then rubber is like another prefix, or because maybe I'll have a brown rubber or maybe a red rubber. It's like me thinking that there might be more materials like this, and so that's why I named them that way. I don't know if that made any sense to you, but something that's kind of natural to a workflow is figuring out how to name and organize your scene, and that's one thing that I can't ever remember talking about why I name things the way I do. But the more general it is and applicable to multiple places, it will have a more general name. But then the more specific it becomes, it will have a multiple prefixed name. Let's see. Now for the black, let's create the settings for the black rubber material. The color, of course, needs to be much darker, like a black. And actually, maybe we can leave the rest of the settings as is. It kind of already reads that way. Maybe a little bit less specularity. 0.6, maybe make it a little bit more rough. There we go. I think that's fine. And then for the middle, we will add the actual stick portion. We will add the metal. Make sure that I'm only getting the stick itself. There we go. Assign. Okay, now for this this little square here, I kind of assume is like a radar display, something like that. So I'm gonna add it as like a green, slightly reflective screen. So if we tab into edit mode, let's go ahead and add this material slot, grow the selection to be just the screen, add a new slot and new material. Let's call it cockpit radar display. Let's assign that material. We're just going to make it, like a slightly darker, subtle green color. That's a little too much. Definitely darker than that. Maybe like this with a more a specular. Yeah, I'll go all the way up on. I'm kind of changing my mind in the middle of it. Let's go to a let's leave it at a 0.5 level of specularity, but the roughness is going to go down to like 0.1. And now we can start to see a little bit of this kind of screen that I'm talking about. You know, I'm not putting too much detail in, but like we're never going to see it closer than like this. And in that situation, I think it's going to be fine. I'm just trying to block out these materials as quick as possible so I can get to really the more fun part of like hand painting the textures. But you can't forget the cockpit either, because with the Alt-H, if we bring back our cockpit glass like we are going to see in there, we need to have something. Another thing that's a little painfully obvious to me right now is there's no ambient occlusion. So let's go ahead and turn that on. It's not on by default. In the Eevee render settings, turn on ambient occlusion. And right away, especially when this screen, this is every time I rehearse this, I get to the screen part and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to have ambient occlusion. You can just see that turning it on and off gives more depth and, I don't know, a better feel to this whole thing. We can turn it on and off from outside. It's especially noticeable in that screen for some reason. But I am going to increase the distance perhaps slightly. Let's see what it looks like outside. What is the default? Reset to default value. 0.2. I usually like to increase the distance a little bit. My taste for the ambient occlusion, it's a little too subtle right off the bat, like the default settings. So I usually push the factor up to like 1.5, maybe even 2, depending on what I'm feeling. There we go. But that looks a little bit better. It's also kind of cool with Eevee that like when I'm inside the cockpit, it reads pretty well. But then when I'm outside the cockpit, it just seems like you've seen those camera shots in movies where it like a camera goes through glass, like it's a CG effect, but like it's what it feels like. And I don't know, that's kind of cool. I expected Eevee, I guess, to like kind of glitch out when I do that, but it seems to work very naturally. It feels very natural. So anyway. Similarly for these little dials, now they all are sharing object data, so this makes it easier. I don't have to apply the materials to each one, but we can just assign it to one and it'll propagate down to all those. I will add the first material slot to be that same metal. You know, there's a metallic theme in the cockpit if you can't tell. So we'll add the metal and then hit a new material slot. Let's go grab the radar display, but then duplicate it because we're going to use essentially the same settings, but I'm going to call it, I'm going to change it slightly. So the cockpit gauge face, let's say. This is going to be much darker and maybe in the like navy blue direction. And I need to actually assign it to something. So let's grow the, maybe L, Control L. Yeah, this has a cut in the gauge, so I can hit Control L to select that island. And assign it. There we go. I think that looks kind of cool. It fits with the cartoony, nature. That's also something too. I'm not trying to texture and shade this thing to be like physically photoreal or anything like that. It's going to fit with the lighthearted, stylized nature of the model itself. So I think we're going that direction and we're being successful with it. Next, for the seat itself, should I texture this? I can imagine maybe texturing it a little bit. So I'll leave the option open. I'll just create a base material for now, and because I don't like it being white. So let's add a new material. We'll call it cockpit leather. And this is going to be a brownish material, brownish orange. Definitely make it darker. Something like this. Yeah, for now. And since those are also sharing object data, I only have to add it to the one. Did you know that you can assign materials to either object data or object themselves? So if I wanted these two objects to share the same data, meaning that I can, move the geometry around and it will propagate to this other piece, I want to maintain that, but I want them to have different materials, you would change where you assign it to. You can assign, by default, you assign it to object data, and that's why they share the material. But if we change it to object itself, then we can have different materials, and we can, add something here that's red or something. Anyway, fun fact, took me a long time using Blender to realize you can assign materials to different things. It's kind of hidden right here. Let's undo. All right, so at this point, I believe we can say that we are done blocking out the cockpit, which is good. You know, like I kind of wanted that out of the way so I can focus. You know, when I start painting this thing, I don't want to look at my painted texture and be like, oh, this looks cool. But man, that white, untextured, unshaded cockpit is such an eyesore. It can be a distraction. So now that we've done that, we can start thinking about laying out UVs. Does that work in 2.792? Yes, it does. That's a setting that's been around, and also in 2.79. I don't know if it has this icon or not, but it's in the same general location. See if I missed any other question. Doesn't look like I did. Excellent. Are we following along? Is it making sense? I want to make sure you're with me still. But now we're moving on to UV texturing, and I want to. My goal right here is to make my job as easy as possible. If I don't have to texture something by hand, then I won't. And that also goes for like the wheels here. I haven't really been outside the cockpit. So now I'm going to be thinking about what should be hand painted and what doesn't need it. Obviously, the exterior of the airplane will need it. So this is one object for UV texturing. The front of the propeller, like the dome, I don't know if that has a proper name, but this thing is going to definitely be hand painted. The propeller will be hand painted. What else? The wheels can be hand painted, but only part of it. So if I tab into edit mode on the wheels, you know, I'll just add the regular metal material to the little like hubcap portions, but then the actual tire, maybe I'll add some scratches and things like that. Awesome, you guys are following along. Seems brilliant. So while I'm kind of dealing with this, well, I'm answering the question, what needs to be UV'd? The wheel does need to be UV'd. So I've got all of my UV objects selected. The supports for the wheels do not need to be. I think the seat, I will go ahead and UV lay it out. And this might be it. So it's not all the objects, but you know, we've got several. Now, the reason I only have to select this one up here is because they're sharing data. So this bottom cushion will also inherit the UV layout. And that's true for the propeller because it's using an array modifier. And so I really, if we turn that off, I only have to texture the one and it'll propagate around. So kind of being aware of how your scene is constructed and making the modifiers work to your advantage it can take some getting used to, I guess. It's usually easy to like collapse it all down into a base mesh and then start deciding this. But you can also be very powerful to work in conjunction with the modifiers. So I'm trying to maintain that. All right, with these things selected, I'm going to go to local view so that I know that only the objects visible are ones that need UVs. It's kind of a pain whenever you lay out everything, you get it just the way you want, and then there's one object that you forgot, and you got to somehow fit it in somewhere. So in this case, I'm trying to eliminate that frustration. But in 2.8, we have the ability to edit mode multiple objects, which is great for UVing especially. So we have a tab for UV editing. Let's go to that one. All right. It's yeah, I guess this is fine. Yeah, this is fine. This layout's fine. I don't really need the tool panel, so let's hit the T key, get just a slight bit of real estate back. And actually, I think the wheels are sharing object data. Let me make sure. Yeah, they are sharing object data. So this one can be, it doesn't need to be in local view. So let me just, well, bummer. What do I need? I want to get that out of local view. I guess I have to, yeah, I have to select everything again. I don't think this selection, anyway. So let's go through these again. I only need one wheel this time. I don't need both to lay out. Just those objects. I think that's it. All right, back to local view with my objects for UVing. And we will start laying things out. Start cutting our seams. Now, so cutting seams for something like this is, I think, fairly simple. Like they're kind of primitive based shapes. You know, it's not like a human body that's got like no primitive, very little primitive connection at all. Maybe the arms can be, but in this case, it should be pretty easy to lay these UVs out. So an obvious spot is to draw a seam, is to cut a seam around the wing. That's just going to eliminate a lot of stretching. So we'll cut a seam there, and then we need to like split the wing and like fold it out, you know, like this. And so I am going to cut a seam along the edge of the wing, and then separate right there because that will make it fold out a little more evenly. It's kind of like a subdivided cube shape. Cut those seams right there. And then let me, I'm gonna hit spacebar because I use the tool search as my spacebar function. And I'm gonna type in mirror. Select mirror will make the same selection on the other side of the model if it's symmetrical, but I need to change it to be extend. With extend enabled, it will remember what you selected before and not remove it. So now we've got both sides selected. Works great for a symmetrical model. Control E and choose mark seam. All right, so I'm not going to lay out yet. I'm going to cut a few seams that I think will get me further down the road with laying out. Laying out too early is kind of pointless in my opinion. So the next thing to do is maybe cut a seam down the full length of the fuselage. I think that's one technical term I have correct. We'll cut that seam, Control E, mark seam. And actually I'm going to maximize this. I don't like how small this viewport is. So I'm going to maximize it with Control Spacebar. So I can just select my seams in peace and unprohibited, uninhibited, that's the word. All right, so I'm going to cut the same thing that I did with the wing, I will apply to our other fins. All right, so cutting a seam around the bottom and then up the side like this. Control E, mark seam. Control E, Alt click to select an edge loop. Same exact pattern. Pretty easy since they're all similar shapes. Control E, or I actually need to select the mirror. Control E, mark seam. All right, do I have everything? No, I need to cut a seam around the cockpit. Remember, we're not really worried at all about UVs for the cockpit, so I'm just gonna cut a seam to separate it, and then in the UV editor, I'll just kind of move it or shrink it way down because it's not needed. And I believe now we can try to do an unwrap. So with that selected, that should be the majority of our seams. We just need to fix maybe anything that I missed. So unwrap. All right, so we can see our UVs laid out. Now, I am a fan of the stretching visualization so that it kind of shows what the stretching is like for the faces. And in the, where are we at? It used to be in the tool panel, but I believe now it's found in the in panel. It's not tool, what about view? Oh yeah, I remember it's hidden in overlays and then you're stretching. That one is kind of buried, but there it is. The reason I'm pointing this out is I just answered somebody's question on our site about where to turn this setting on, and already that question is not correct anymore. But we'll turn on stretching, and I like to use area particularly. That seems most useful because it shows that wherever there is red, it's a lot of stretching, and so I want to eliminate that stretching as much as possible. Blue to teal, I'm okay with. Blue to green, I might want to fix, but blue to yellow and orange, I definitely want to fix. Oh, the save police. Thank you, thank you. Because this version has been crashing, knock on wood. Save as plain stream 01. Thank you, save police. I very much appreciate it. That would have been a major buzzkill if it crashed and I had to start over. Thank you. Yeah, so we're talking about stretching. Now, what this tells me is that the end of the tail, of the fuselage is too stretchy. All right, so I need to cut some relief seams so that it has a little bit more room to unfold. And if you've happened to ever do origami, I feel like you would be really good at UV laying out. All right, so what I'm going to do is cut cut seams just kind of like this, right? So I'm going to cut this seam just as an example, mark seam, you unwrap. And you can see that we have some relief on that piece. Now it only turned to yellow, but once we do that same kind of cut to everything else, to the rest of the dome, we should get a better layout. So that's what I'm doing. Let me select that again just for the sake of symmetry. Let's select this. And then select the mirror, Control E, mark seam. And now select everything and unwrap. Okay, so it is a little bit better. I expected it to do better than that. Maybe I should add another edge to it. Control E, mark seam. No, that's getting worse. That's kind of strange. I remember that being better. I wonder if it's the type of unwrap. So angle based, what about conformal? Turn on use subsurface modifier. That's kind of interesting. I'm not sure why that's laying out poorly. Maybe I should I cut that all the way up? Control E, mark seam. This is not how I did it in rehearsal. Well, that works a little bit better, but still, this middle thing is bizarre. Okay, I know that I've laid this out better than this, so I'm going to actually maybe select all new seams for this back part. Let's circle select. Oh, wait a minute. Let me just select those manually. So on one hand, this isn't that important. Like the stretching shouldn't be that big of a deal. On the other, but at the same time, I know that I've laid it out better than this. Let's select mirror. So I kind of want it to be better. Control E, clear seam. What if it was like, maybe it can be more, Bear with me, maybe I'll cut fewer seams this time. Select mirror, Control E, mark seam. That is weird. Anyway, why not cut a seam around to make a separate dome out of the tail? That's not a bad idea. We can do that. The reason I wouldn't want to do it initially is I kind of like it being one solid UV island, but since it's not working out that way, maybe I will do that. Ben, I think you're missing an edge. I mean, this is what I expected as far as the edges, but maybe the scale isn't 1:1. Yeah, you're going through the right troubleshooting thing. Make sure your scale, it is set to 1, but that is definitely something worth checking. Man, it's bizarre. Let me just try something real quick. I'm going to save this. I'm going to look at, oh, and it crashed. Thank you, Save Police. Let's try this again. And I'm going to open up the Explore version, my rehearsal version, because I swear my UVs were better than that. And UV editor. I guess it wasn't. I guess I only got to orangish yellow. I'm disappointed in myself, and even more so in my memory. So I guess it's not going to get better. Let's go with Ben's suggestion. Or whose suggestion was it? Someone suggested lopping the back end off. Let's do that. Why not? Again, this isn't that big of a deal. This is sort of my OCD kicking in because the stretching still is not going to be noticeable. But let's go back, and someone mentioned kind of lopping off the back end. So let's do it. What if we do it here? No, that doesn't make as much sense. Control E, mark seam. And then I think only one of these needs to be entirely cut. Maybe turn these, Control E, clear those seams. Let's try this. Control E. No. Oh, I need to, that would have messed up. Control E, mark seam, and hit everything, unwrap, select everything. Now where's that dome? Where's that dome at? Oh yeah, it's right here, and it's actually, I don't need to perhaps have any seams like this. Actually, I think I'll leave that. Anyway, I spent too much time nitpicking over that. So let's get underway again. Thanks for the help and the help me troubleshooting that, guys. But anyway, I guess that tail is not going to be as clean as I thought it was earlier. All right, but we're done with the fuselage. We've laid out the UVs there. And something that I'll do right now is remember that this is the cockpit internals and very unimportant. We're not going to worry about texturing that at all. But since it's part of the mesh, it's included in the UVs, so I'm just going to move that off. It's not important. And it does kind of skew the colors of everything else. You can see that as I scale that up and down, like it does change the rest of everything, but that's okay. I'm kind of done with these UVs, and I know that I can push them off to the, I can take what's unimportant and kind of shrink it and push it off to the side. All right, on to the next object. I do not want to spend this whole time. It's already been 40 minutes. I don't want to spend too much time UVing. So this should unwrap better, as long as my memory is serving me correctly. This is the front cone. Have you ever used the quad unwrap add-on? I have not used that, Omar. Is that, what does it do? Yeah, I'm curious what that does. The quad unwrap. It's not included with Blender, is it? Preferences. Quad. It doesn't look like it. Not included. All right, so the same, I'm curious, again, Omar, kind of what that does exactly. But it's supposed to be the same idea as the back of the cone. Maybe this cone is not quite as extreme, so it should unwrap better. But what I'm going to do here is the same thing. I need one seam to cut the entire length of the dome. So I'm going to Alt-click on an edge like this. And then I think I can just cut another edge down the middle of each propeller. That's going to keep it nice and uniform. We're going to cut it down to about maybe there. I'm very confident this will unwrap better. And that should be about it. Whoops, Control E, mark seam, A, U, unwrap. And, oh, tricky, Mr. Williamson. If we zoom way in, there is a tiny little edge loop that I missed. Control E, mark seam. Now it should unwrap better. There we go. Now we're in the green to teal range, and that's what I'm comfortable with. It's an add-on for that kind of devilish crybaby difficult seams. Oh, interesting. I'll have to look into it, because it'd be nice to have like a knock out those questionable seams pretty well and let the computer do most of it for you. That would be great. All right, so this is a much better unwrap, much easier. Now we do have some red to green to like lime green, almost yellowish kind of color inside the propeller, but we're not really going to see any of that. So I'm okay not cutting that out and giving it its own proper texel density. I'm just going to leave it. That's going to be a very simple unwrap. On to the next piece. While I'm at it, since I've unwrapped two objects, let's just start hiding with H the objects I have unwrapped, and then I can slowly visually start to tick off my list what's left. Maybe save this as a new version. The save police taught me a good lesson. Thank you. And with this, remember, it is an array modifier, so I just have to unwrap the one. It's going to be a pretty simple object. Let's just unwrap along this edge. Well, actually, go down the middle. Yeah, that makes more sense. And then what I don't want to do is lop the propeller in half, and then you have two separate islands. I do like to keep the island connected. And so in order to keep it connected, you just tell this edge, for example, to not be a seam. So Control E, mark seam, unwrap it, and maybe we can actually leave the bottom one connected too. Control E, clear seam. But if you can see that the error is, it's nice and attached here and it's fully blue, so it's a really clean unwrap. But then at the bottom, they kind of overlap. The algorithm makes them overlap. So if I turn off this seam, Control E, or I've already cleared the seam, you unwrap. Well, yeah, I guess at this point I should just kind of clear the seam entirely. If we look at that again, we still have some overlap and it's green. Well, here's another option. Let's undo the seam clearing. Instead of this one, Control E, let's mark that as seam and let's make this one clear. What that should do is make these two edges connect, and then you have an angle. Instead of this, it'll angle like that. Let's see if that works. Like a charm. There we go. It's closer to blue and it's further away from green, which is good. So we maintain that blue to teal range. It's a little bit weirder of an island shape. They're still connected, but I don't know. There's maybe an argument that could be made that it would be better. Now that I'm thinking about it, getting a little OCD, maybe it would be better to cut it. Mark seam. Whoops. You unwrap. Because now I've got long, slender islands that I can kind of fit anywhere. But again, this is not like AAA game quality UV layout. I'm just getting the project kind of done. It's it's like average UVing work. So it's not that big of a deal. Let's just leave it lopped in half, I guess, and move on to the next thing. Let's hide this. Only two more things to unwrap. Man, UVing, I get so OCD, and you probably noticed sometimes in modeling, like I just can't move on. I gotta fix these stupid little things. Anyway, so the wheels. Remember, we're gonna make the hubcap metal, so they don't really matter. I'm not gonna worry about them. They'll be included in the UV map, but I'll shrink them and move them over. They don't matter. But for this, we have a couple options for a wheel-like shape. Number one, I could just cut along here. Mark seam and then unwrap. And it seems like the hubcaps are already separate objects, like within the mesh, separate meshes. So that works out fine. I don't need to cut seams there. But for the main portion, you can see it unwraps actually not that great. It's got a lot of green in it. So we have this option, which doesn't seem to be optimal. But then we've got another option. Let's clear the seam. Control E, clear seam. Let's mark it right here down the middle of one of the grooves and maybe deselect one edge. Same kind of thing. I want to lop it in half, but then keep it connected. The connection, if you need an explanation, for me is like, if you think about the whole UV layout, and if one part of the wheel is like in the bottom left corner, but then the other part of the wheel is like hidden in the upper right corner, I just don't like that visually as an organization. I want to know that this whole island belongs to the wheel. I don't like separating it out too much if I can help it. So that's why I keep them connected. Mark seam, you unwrap. And surprisingly, this looks to be a little better. It's not in the green range as much as it's in like the blue to teal range. So I guess this is fine. I expected the other way to be a better unwrap, but it looks like this is actually going to be superior. Question from Miranda. How important is it to have nice islands and such for texturing? Because Lampell in his sculpting course has lots of different little pieces everywhere and it fits, but you always try to make nice looking layout in your courses and keep things together. Yes, so the reason you don't, like Lampell doesn't have to be really, really fine-tuned with like how he places all his islands and organizes them. It's kind of the concept of using, let's see, smart UV project, right? If I do that, it just creates a bunch of random islands. Like the computer decides where to cut these islands off. And that's okay because technology in 3D texture painting has advanced. So when we get to the texture painting part, when I started computer graphics, we didn't have the ability to paint on the 3D model. You had to paint in Photoshop in a 2D package, export your UV layout as an image, and just paint according to the island. So I come from that where it's very important to be organized in your UV islands because you don't have the ace in the hole option to paint in 3D. Now, towards the end of college, I started using body paint, which was the first 3D painting application I'd ever really used that was kind of like Photoshop in Cinema 4D. And that's when I realized, wow, seams are much less important because you can just paint seamlessly right over them. And so that's definitely valid. And in a quick and dirty job, that's what I'll do, is just lay out trash UVs, make a bigger texture map so that the seams and the textile density is not so important. Because like, look at this, look how much wasted space textile density is in this particular layout. Whereas Lampel, he does better than this, way better than this. But still, I know what you mean. He's got a lot of small islands kind of packed in there really tight. I think I've explained that. Like, it comes down a little bit to preference. I think that a cleaner, more organized way to work is a little bit what I'm doing. But do you have to do it in order to get the job done? No. I think that's what I'll leave it as. If I go back, yeah, to me this is just a little bit cleaner. It's more optimal, and yeah, it's just my way of working. It's always worked out for me. I've never really, if I don't have to be quick and dirty, I won't. So now that I've got, I think all of my objects. No, I've still got to do this. So select this object, and it's basically a cube, which makes it pretty easy to unwrap. We'll just cut seams around here. And make sure I leave it connected somewhere. No. Yes, right here. I can remove this seam. That way it stays connected. Control E, mark seam. Whoops, not smart. UV project. Unwrap. There we go, nice and clean. A little bit stretched into the green spectrum, but I'm not too worried about it. Seems there's some fear about AI in the chat. I can get pretty distracted by that. Whoops, I didn't mean to leave local view. Can I undo that? No. You can't undo local view. Interesting. Anyway, let's just Alt-H to unhide everything. Is my selection maintained? Oh, it is. Cool. So I can just go back to local view. I think this is all my UV'd objects. I didn't mean to. I want to maintain my view that has just the UV'd objects. I think that's this. Pretty sure. Yeah, it looks like it. All right. So now that I've individually laid out each piece, it's time to bring it together into a consolidated UV map, so that I only need one texture that I can apply, or one UV set that I can create textures across multiple objects. And I can do this by selecting everything, all my objects, and diving into edit mode. You can see all our UVs kind of on top of each other. This is the piece of the cockpit that's unimportant. So I'll select everything except this guy, Shift L. And these are pieces that can be position, what do you call it? Packing the islands, that's what I mean. So UV, average island scale, I usually like to do first. It kind of, well, it didn't do anything there, but if the scales of the individual islands are off respective to the 3D view, then it will correct. And then I can go to UV, whoops, redo my selection. UV pack islands. There we go. I don't know what that was about. All right, so we've got our islands laid out. They don't look the right size, do they? There we go. Man, I don't know. I did both of those operations at first and they didn't do anything. UV pack islands now. Okay, now they're the right scale and they're packed. So maybe I can spend a little bit of time trying to organize this a little better, like maximize my textile density. So let's see, how could I do that? And is it really that important? Another option I've been playing with lately is if you go to the UV pack islands settings, increasing the margin can actually make for a better layout sometimes. Yeah, I think this is fine. This is honestly an example of like a quick and dirty layout for me, because there is a ton of wasted space. But for the sake of time, I don't want to get caught up in this. This will be fine. The only concession I really need to make is the texture needs to be bigger than what I was expecting. So I was going to paint it 2048. Let me do a test to see if that's going to be enough. So if I add let me save my scene. Let me go to texture paint. And how do I want to do this? In the material slot that we left open for the paint material, let's go ahead and create that. In the material properties, new, we'll call it plain paint. All right, and then I need a texture, so we'll go to the texture, the tool settings, and where it says no textures, this is where the slots go. So we'll add a base color slot. And plain paint, we'll call it just color, _ color in all caps. That's how I like to name textures, is usually the same name as the object, or the same name as like the general like model that I'm creating. Or, I'm sorry, it's the same name as the object or model I'm creating with an _ in all caps, displacement, normal, color, metallic, that kind of thing. That's just how I do it. And then for the size, let's go with 2048. The color, let's make it that kind of, well, let me look in the layout because that's where I had my image. Yeah, so the base color is going to be this brown sort of color. Back to texture paint, and we'll make, bummer. So I need to, yeah, I guess I can't reference that information while I'm creating a texture. 2048, plain paint _ color. And then that brown color is something like this. I don't need an alpha channel, so we'll just deselect that. Should save a little bit of like file size space. And okay, so I was doing it. The whole point of this was to do a test to see if 2048 is going to be enough texture density. And it actually might not be. Let me see back here where it was kind of stretched. Yeah, that might not be enough. Maybe I need to go to 4096. Yeah, let's see if Blender can handle 4096. So if I want to adjust that texture size, the way to do that, I'm in texture paint. So something that I find is missing from the texture paint option is the shader editor. I feel like that should be a pretty crucial part. I always pull up a new panel for the shader editor, so that way I can select the actual image texture and change. There's just important settings there. So let's see, properties for the node, the paint color node, which is our texture. Properties, it's a generated map 2048. While it's still a generated map, I can change this to 4096, and it will eliminate any paint strokes that we made, but it will keep the same base color. So now I've up-resed to 4096, and our texture paint is going to be a lot better. All right, so we're going to go with that. I feel like I missed a couple questions. Hold on a second. Let's see. If I have a 10 million poly model, let me start over. If I have a 10 million poly model, it is UV, textures hand painted, and now I want to lower the poly count significantly. Do I have to lose the UVs as a retopo, then hand paint again, or is there a same way to save the UV layout? So what I would do is probably, if you're talking about doing a retopology, you can retopo the new mesh on top of the old one, and then bake textures from the first version onto the new UVs of the second version, right? Just like you would bake normal maps from one object to the next, you can do that with color as well. And that's how in the past if I've ever needed to do that, you can basically bake the map from the first UV set of the model to the second model and its UV set. There can sometimes be artifacts, just like whenever you're baking displacement or anything from one object to the next, it's based on that cage and those settings. So there can be artifacts you might have to fix manually, but you don't have to start from scratch. In other words, can I save the UVs if I want to lower the poly count with the models, maintain all quads? I don't know. Not with the retopo. You can't like just transfer the UVs to the new topology. If you use a decimate modifier, I believe there is an option in there. Let's take a look. If I go to object mode, add decimate. Maybe not. I thought there was a way to. Maybe not. I know in ZBrush, whenever you the decimation, use the decimation master, you could maintain UVs, I think. But I guess that's not possible here. I'm curious, though. That's something I should look into. I wonder if it happens anyway. You just don't have to tell it to. Anyway. No, not being rude at all. No, I want you guys to ask questions. So anyway, I don't know if I gave you a definitive answer, but I am going to look into the decimation, if decimation keeps UVs or not. Anyway, let's go back to texture painting. Yeah, so where was I? I increased the resolution to 4096, and the reason I wanted to do that is because I was a little more loosey-goosey with my UVs, and I'm trying to speed up the workflow a little bit. I didn't take the time to fully optimize texel density, and so to compensate for it, I create a higher resolution texture, and we'll be fine. Blender handles 4096 textures. Okay. So now, to start texture painting these objects, let's start with, I'm going to drag up a new panel so we can look at my reference for how I painted it earlier. Image editor, and where was it? Feature, that one. I do not need to see UVs. Okay. All right, so we've got this. We can kind of take a look at how we're going to be save alert. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. The color scheme here, it's kind of like a classical World War II type plane was the general genre. And so we've got this nice red cone on front, even though, I guess they did that in World War II. I mean, I looked up World War II planes, so I assume that's true. But these little like target symbols, kind of generic, but adds a little bit of splash of color. Let's just maximize this. I'm talking about these little symbols here, very simple to paint. I don't know if this is an actual flag of a country, but it's just, kind of representative of that. Nice little yellow tips on the propellers. But for now, we're working on the fuselage. So there's kind of two components that I'm going to start with. And it's the bottom being a lighter color and then the top being kind of a camo sort of thing. So we're going to block out our colors and then start to add detail. So the scratches will come later, but first I just want to block out colors, get some gradients involved, and we'll go from there. But now that we have that, in the picture, I can work with this. Man, I really feel like in this example, maybe the shader, where is it? It's gone. Let's add a new tab for shading. Oh, wow, I just didn't see it. There it is. I feel like this is going to work better for texture painting. I've never used this panel, so let's just get rid of it. And this way, I've got my node editor. Gosh, I need to bring up that panel again. Image editor. Feature. All right. There we go. So you can see, like, I've had people ask why I don't use these tabs all the time, and I just am used to doing whatever I need in the moment and like separating the UI how I want. So that's kind of why the tabs are not super intuitive to me. You can't make one shading tab work for everybody's workflow. I think it's more for beginners just to get into the mindset of, oh, there is a different set of editors for this particular task. Anyway. Yeah, so I want to paint this object, the fuselage, a little lighter on the bottom half. So texture paint, and a couple things to be aware of in this situation. What's that pink for? I don't know. That's a bit of an eyesore. But when you're texture painting in Blender 2.8, you have this texture paint opacity. That's, I think, an improvement over pre 2.8, in that if you take it all the way down, why is it just white, actually? Oh, I'm in solid mode. Okay, if you go to look dev mode, there we go. So this is, your texture paint overlay is like the pure color information of your texture, which is great because like a lot of times you don't want to paint with the shading of the object involved, right? There's OpenGL shading and you don't want that to mess with your understanding of the colors that you're painting. So it's great to have that, and it was cumbersome to really see that in the last version, but we've got that as a slider now. So when we slide it all the way down, this is what the texture looks like incorporated into the material, right? So we're seeing the output of this. If I shift control click, I've got the node wrangler add-on enabled. If we shift control click on that, we get essentially the same thing. So it's the pure color information of the texture. But it's nice that we can have both depending on our needs. If we want to see how the texture, especially with the metallic that we'll be doing, hopefully before too long, the metallic scratches, we can see how it's working in the material, or we can paint it pure color information. So in this situation, I actually I want to paint the pure color, but I think I can do it within the shading of the model. So first, let's establish the right color. So I'm going to let's hold S to bring up my color selection, and we will. And I thought I did that. S color pick. Is that not working? Crash. Nuts. I think this is the wrong version of Blender. Let me try again. Where did I save that last one at? Previous layout. Oh well, I'll just roll with it. You can't save enough, it seems. All right, so we were talking about texture painting this, and if you noticed, I was color picking the brown color. It did not update here, but it did update in the. No, it didn't. S color pick. Okay, that's bizarre. So. Looks like color picking is a little delayed or something. That's weird. All right, so I've color picked the color, and now I'm going to just make it a little bit lighter. This might be a good time to start creating a color palette, something that we can go back to regularly. So I will create a color palette. You can only do that here. You can't do it. Maybe you can do it in the in panel now. Yeah, you can do it over here. All right, so maybe this is a good excuse then to maximize this view and just do my business here. So color palette, we've got one version of the color. Let's go to the light version, desaturate it a bit. All right, I think that's gonna work well. Add that color. So now we've established the bottom and top of that particular style of plane. Now, an issue with painting like on shadeless view essentially is that you can't see where your geometry is, and you're just painting on whatever. So you can either add the shading in, or you can also use a wireframe. All right, so by turning on, what is this setting called? Face selection masking. By turning that on, I can actually, tell that I'm painting on the bottom of the plane, up the wing, without the shading information, and that's nice. So that's kind of another option for the best of both worlds sort of thing. You still have access to the full color, like I can color pick right there, and it is the full color as opposed to the shaded version. But you can still make out what the object is. All right, so we're going to turn on symmetry. Where is that now? Okay, it's all the way at the bottom of the in panel. We will turn on X symmetry, and I will use a stroke method of the line stroke method. All right, so I can now draw straight lines if I use the right color. There we go. Now I can paint straight lines, and it should be propagated to the other side. Perfect. All right, let's just paint the bottom here. Maybe actually undo that and make my fall off a little sharper. Still getting used to no toolbar. Where is my fall off? I mean, this is exactly like 2.79, so it's, I don't know, it's been like a roundabout change anyway. Let's use this one right here. That's my usual sharper fall off preference. All right. I've got to get on with it. I feel like I'm taking forever to explain this stuff. Now, something else I can do here. It looks like my strength is not all the way up at 1. Brilliant. So I wasn't getting the full color. Try it again. But what if I could do this a little bit faster rather than going stroke by stroke? I wonder, yeah, I can actually probably do this from the side view and turn off, where is it? Options? Yeah. Options, occlude, and backface culling, and then also turn off fall off, normal fall off. Are you following with this? Are you following with the settings that I'm using? I feel like I'm bouncing around. But now with those turned off, the paint will project all the way through the object, and so I don't have to go stroke by stroke. So I can literally paint right through that wing. All right, now we've got the top and bottom of the wing painted, and the entire thing, because the paint just projected all the way through. And then do the same thing from the side. Maybe try and do a slight little curve. All right, I'll paint out some of that, but this is making my job much faster right now. Awesome, in just a couple strokes, I've painted the whole bottom. Question from Peter, you switched to GNOME. Yeah, I did switch to Linux. Just curious if you don't mind me asking, how does it compare to the Mac OS? Which distribution did you pick? What motivated you? Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a longer explanation. I'll tell you like some of those details, but I wanted to change computers. I needed to because my Mac was 5 years old and it was starting to show. I'm gonna switch to, where's my stroke method? Back to space. I'm just gonna clean this up while I try and explain it. Hold Control and start painting. So yeah, whoops. Might be hard to explain. Let me just do it real quick. I wanted to try Linux because, you know, Blender makes me believe in open source. I know a lot of people use Linux. The Foundation uses entirely Linux, so I know it's possible, and I believe in that ideology, I guess. So that's why I wanted to switch. I went with Pop OS initially, and it was fine. There were a couple quirks that were a little frustrating about it. Then I switched to Deepin OS, which is gorgeous. I think it's absolutely delicious as a user interface. It had its fair share of quirks, but I've solved, I think, all of them. I'm up and running like full speed now. But Linux to me is just quirky. Like there's weird settings that are turned off by default, and you just have to find those. It's different for each distribution I've tried. I've installed Fedora Linux on other systems before, and Ubuntu and stuff like that. But anyway, is that what your question was? Yeah, which distribution did you pick? So right now I'm on Deepin OS, which is based on Debian stable. Yeah, no, I mean, people maybe don't want to know that right now, but like it's helpful to know what system I'm running and like what kind of things like that. So yeah, that's not a problem. Happy to answer. If we were in a coffee shop, I would go on for a lot longer why I chose these things. But anyway, I need to re-enable in my options occlude and backface culling because I want to paint on this from the top. That way it gives me a nice clean seam, but it doesn't paint to the other side. All right, so that's actually, I think we're pretty much done with that. Blocking out those main colors. And maybe I can start painting. Let's just go to another object. Let's try and get most of this color rounded out. And we've got that established. Let's start texture painting the red. And gosh, that is a hideous visualization. I don't know what that's about. But I need to create a material for this. No, I don't need to create one. I can use the plain paint material. All right, we can use that one and just continue painting on the texture, which needs to be like a red color. Let's go with this. And then to just kind of flood the whole thing, there's a fill brush. Yeah, I guess it's a brush. and for some reason the color does not stay from brush to brush. So let's copy that, paste it over to the fill brush, and make the strength all the way up to 1. There we go. Got a nice red cone on the end. Go back to object mode. All right, I want to block out everything. How about for this propeller, let's also add the paint material, plain paint. It feels like the nose has duplicated faces underneath it. Yeah, it definitely does not. That is something to do with the visualization. Wayne and I are working on a project together, and he's complained a lot about it, like that visualization. If we go to texture paint mode, yeah, it does look like duplicated faces, but it's definitely not. And it also works this way, I think, with weight paint. Okay, that seems to be fixed, but it was working that way with weight paint. Texture paint still seems to be that way. Anyway, kind of annoying. I mean, does anyone else think a beta software should be should not be like this? I don't know. I shouldn't start that. I should not start that. I do kind of think that they jumped the gun with the beta label. I think it should have waited and stayed in alpha, but I don't know. I was upset about that earlier this week. Anyway, object, maybe late last week. So anyway, the propellers, we're going to texture paint mode, and we are using that same plain paint material, which has the slots already set up. I just need to fill it with a dark color. We're going to go with mostly black, a little bit lighter than black. Let's say right there. Let's fill it. Awesome. Camouflage pink. All right, and while I'm at it, I might as well draw that little yellow stripe at the top. So let's do that with the texture paint. I think I'll just freehand it. Why not? Go to a yellow color, maybe a little bit brighter. Yeah, that's simple enough. And okay, I need to turn off my options for occlude and backface culling. There we go. I think that's pretty clean. I could switch to the line brush or the line fall off method if I wanted it to be super precise. But that's going to be fine. We've got that blocked out. And then let's go to look depth. Maybe that's what I need to be looking at. All right, we're coming along. Let's fix the wheels. Let's just block those in while we're at it. What's going on? All right, so the texture slots. The first one is going to be our plain paint material. Add another slot. This is going to be the metal, the generic metal. Let's assign that. All right, that looks good. Okay, but that needs to be painted dark. Another thing that's useful is if we go to texture paint, you might not know this, but I guess that only happens on procedural materials, like things that don't actually have a texture applied to them. Interesting. If I tab into edit mode and just select the wheel, just the part of the mesh that I want to paint, if we turn on this setting, which I used initially just as a wireframe visualization, but it's actually got a deeper purpose than that, and that is for masking. So if we read it, face selection masking for painting means it maintains your selection and makes it a mask for the sake of painting. So in this case, I've got you can't really tell, but this metal portion is not selected. Now, if I switch to my fill brush, and let's make it that similar type of dark color, maybe not quite as dark as the propeller. There we go. Now we've got wheels that make sense color-wise. All right. Excellent. So this is really like first step of texture painting done. We blocked out colors, and now we can start the next phase, which is adding gradients, in my opinion. Like this is it blew my mind when I saw people start using gradients as like a baseline hand paint method, and it's really powerful. So I'm going to start adding gradients to each of these pieces. It's Kent's fault. I'm used to 2.8. He used it for his classes last year. Yes, I'm on the 2.8 hype train for sure. I just I'm not gonna get into it. I think we might have a crash. And I didn't save my texture. Does anyone remember the hotkey for saving the texture? Is it nuts? Oh, nuts. Buzzkill. All right, how fast can I get back there? Alt S. Last restore file. Good idea. Recover autosave. What is the date? But the texture's not there. That's the problem. There's no autosave for the texture information unless you save it to your hard drive. So it doesn't really even matter. Oh, man, what a bummer. Do I really have to do all that again? We have 40 minutes left. I apologize. This is lame. I'm just going to try and get back there as fast as possible. It might be quiet because I'm going to concentrate. But let's just try and get back there. What a bummer. I was at a dilemma a little bit because I almost decided to use the version from May 6th because it was the last version it was the last really stable version I've used, and it also had the toolbar at the top, which I was used to, but then I didn't want to teach that when it's not the way Blender's going to be. So I don't know. This version's been notably unstable, but oh well. Yeah. So tool settings. Let's just try this again. Yeah, it is more crashes than usual for sure. Let's go to stroke line. Turn off my options. Fall off. I liked it when those settings were all three together. That was also a little bit faster. Man, not the full strength. And I will be sure to save it this time. Peter Varga, I agree with the idea of prematurity, judging from the current state of things. As an interface geek, personally, I mind the UI stuff the most, among other things. It's a bit of a mess at the moment. I don't understand why they're doing it this way. Crashes don't help. Yeah, I would much rather prefer development take longer and don't promise that it'll come out. You know, that's what a beta kind of says, like we're about to release, and then they did say we're going to release at a certain time. I would rather not have that promise and have like a purposeful development period than to jump the gun and kind of deal with this stuff. But let me try and get there faster. But yeah, right now, I mean, the toolbar, like it was kind of annoying having to scroll all the way left and all the way right. But I found it to be maybe a little more intuitive than going back to this style where it's like, okay, how do I change? What was I just trying to do? Yeah, I got to go back to the options all the way down here, turn on occlude, go back to fall off, turn on normal fall off. Like, where is my color palette? All right, let's add that one. X, switch it. There we go. Anyway, texture painting, in my opinion, has always been like a sort of a neglected UI situation in Blender. It could be so much more intuitive. But I mean, you know, there's all kinds of features that need to be worked on, so I understand that. All right, let's try and fast track this. Let's save my image, you know, one step at a time. And texture, plain paint. I need to say stream paint, plain paint. PNG is fine. And texture paint mode. What was I doing? Yeah, material, plain paint, fill it with a red color. That's pretty bright. Okay. And then what else did I do? The propellers. Oh, another thing I forgot to do this. The default projection paint setting. So if we go to texture paint, that's a bummer. I hate when I forget this setting. The default texture paint is a bleed value of 2 pixels, which I feel like is never enough. Like you need at least 5 to 10 pixels for this to work reliably. But I always mean to increase that bleed value up from 2. Because if we look at our UVs, view, display texture paint UVs, yeah. So if I go to 2 and paint this, oh, it doesn't have the material yet. Yeah, and if I paint this, you can see that there's just a tiny bit of overshoot right there. And with a lot of seams, it's just not quite enough. So I recommend changing that value. Your where is it? Options, your bleed value, changing that to 5, at least, if not 10 pixels. And now when I fill it, you can see that we have a lot more room for that overshoot. But I forgot to do that. Hopefully it doesn't come back and bite me. All right, and paint the yellow. All right, we're back here. I think just the wheel is left. Alt-S to save my image. Texture save, thank you. I mean, I'm gonna have to be doing this, I think, like every few minutes. Let's see. I should also probably go to Look Dev. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like with the shading involved, you can start to see the final product happen quicker. And that is a fun part of this process, I must admit. All right, and I think we should be caught up once I add these materials and paint the wheel. Let's see, one texture slot for paint, plain paint, another texture slot for the metal. Control, assign the metal. There we go. And then finally texture paint, just the wheel portion with a dark gray, a really dark gray. Not the right brush. Oh, but still has the color. Okay, I believe we're caught up now. Alt-S to save our texture. Ta-da! All right, we have blocked these out, and I was talking about gradients. Yes, this is where my personal hand paint texture skills took a major leap forward by introducing just gradient painting. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. You've seen it before if you've watched some of my other stuff. But I am not a super gifted hand texture painter. If you can't tell, like I can do okay, but I'm not like a super gifted one. But this is one of my favorite techniques. So let's go to the cone first, texture paint. And with the fill brush, we have this option. We have this option for painting a gradient. So under the color, you'll see we have a gradient checkbox. Let's turn that on. And right away, if I just all of a sudden we don't have a fill situation. We have this line that's being drawn, and this is showing the spectrum of the gradient. So if I let go, you can see we've got dark on this side and light on this side. But we can paint it as an overlay, for example. Let's change the method from mix, which just replaces the red, and change it to a darker color, like I'm sorry, total, not the right thing. Change it to a different method, a different blend mode, like let's try overlay first. If Blender will let me do that. Oh, I don't know how much. I don't know how many more of these I can take, and the stream still be. I did save the texture, didn't I? Image, reload. People, I saved the texture. Image, open. Okay, I did save the texture. Did I not save the file? Okay. Have I ever mentioned how much I hate doing things twice? Have I ever mentioned that? All right, so we've got this, like, image, reload. What is happening here? So paint color somehow got disassociated. So somehow this got disassociated from the image. This one. Okay. All right, it's not going to be that much work to redo. I just need to, I'm going to save this file with my whole heart. Appreciate you sticking around. I can't believe I've not really seen a drop-off in viewers, so I appreciate you sticking around. There's no way this is fun to watch or terribly informative. All right. Now, are we ready to start painting gradients? I need to assign plane paint. Control S. I'm going to do it again. Control S. And the image is saved. Say a prayer to the Blender gods that we can make it through this. All right. All right, let's go. The gradient stuff. Yeah, I was painting the front. And let's go to texture paint mode. Fill brush. Gradient. And we wanted to use the overlay method. That's right. So yeah, that gradient right there, it seems simple, but I say it often with lighting too. Like, gradients are super powerful for good lighting. It works for lighting, and it definitely works for painting as well. Painting hand painted textures. And we're back. Catch up. Okay, if it crashes again, I'm probably going to call it. This is just getting ridiculous. Gradient. I didn't save it with the settings, did I? Overlay. Image, save. Like, after every paint stroke, I'm going to have to do this. All right, so that is helpful. Yeah, adding the gradient to the red cone, it just adds a little bit more pop and a little more dimension to the color. It also implies that if you can imagine this thing flying through the air over time, the front of the cone is going to be worn away. Like, the paint will be slowly weathered away, whereas in the crease of the like prop where it spins a lot, there's going to be grime and dirt and stuff that's going to darken this side of the propeller. So it makes sense why you would add this gradient. And then likewise, I typically like to add one to the front color, to the fuselage color as well. Can you even see that? You can start to see it show up a little bit, but we'll also incorporate this into the material settings too. Like we'll have the darker color reflect a little less to represent dirt and grime getting caught in the crevice. But my second pass is adding these gradients because that helps a lot with the color, adds dimension to it. So go to texture paint mode on this guy. And let's add another gradient. Let's just see what it does. Nice. Yeah, you can kind of like layer them. Maybe I'll do a multiply instead. Nice. Yeah, so just a little bit of gradients to break up the monotony of the same color. Oh yeah, Alt S. Alt S. Okay, that's scary when the hotkey's not working for you. Control S. And maybe on the wings too. Oh, that looks pretty good actually. Yeah, I think I'll leave it how it is. All right, so we've got a little bit of gradients involved, and that kind of, again, its main purpose is to break up the monotony of that singular color. Next, maybe I'll just jump straight forward to we'll go to the next stage. I might take a little bit more time typically, but for this, I'm going to try and speed it up. Let's try scratching the surface, right? Let's try and do that right now. Set that up because that's probably the most interesting thing, is real-time painting textures. So let's get this process set up. We're going to need another texture, and this is where we would use multiple texture slots. So let's create a texture paint, and yeah, a new texture. And let's just try the metallic. Let's add a metallic texture to it. We're going to do 4096 by 4096. Plain paint metallic. I'll just call it metal. And yeah, so the default of black will be good because that means no metal. So we'll start with the default being no metal on this plane at all. And we'll hit OK. And so we can, by default, we're painting the raw texture map itself. You can see it plugged in conveniently right there into the metallic. But if I turn off the overlay, now we'll be painting the properties of the metallic. I just had a brain fart. The properties of the metallic in real time with all the shading and lighting incorporated as well. But I also need to think about this because if I disconnect it for a second, we're painting black and white. So 0 is no metal, but all the way to white is like pure metal, but it's colored according to the plain color, right? So it's a metallic version of the brown that we've already painted. That's not what I want. So I need to do a little bit more work here. I want the output of this going to the metal, yes, but I also want mix color is what I want. Let me just take it a little bit slower. I'm going to do that in a second. Let me first show you why it's not entirely intuitive. If I start painting this map, for example, the metalness map, you can see that I'm painting it, well, it's not quite as strong. Like I'm painting metalness onto the object. That's great, but it's only half the battle. Like I don't want metal, this coppery sort of bronze type metal. I want it to be like a stainless steel metal. Well, as if you remember from the metal we created up here, the color for that needs to be white. All right, so if we look at it now, that's what I want to see. So in order to make this work in real time, I need to add a color mix RGB, save the file, save, oh, I need to save my metal texture. Just going to be black and white. All right, we should be good in case of a crash. And so I'm going to use this not only as a factor for the metallic value, but also as a mix factor for whatever color I want to be metal, which would be this kind of gray color. So now we're getting what I am kind of expecting. Aside from one thing, and that is the fact that the roughness value will be different between the paint and the underlying metal. So I also will use this map to adjust for that. So let's add a shader, I'm sorry, let's add a color mix node. This will once again be the factor, where the black value is the roughness of the paint, which we've already established to be 0.5. So I'm hovering over roughness, Control C to copy it, Control V to paste it in slot 1. That used to work. All right, whatever. We'll just set all the RGBs to 0.5, which is what it already was. But for the metal, we want it to be much lower, like 0.2. Maybe 0.3, if I recall. All right, so now we've got that. That will adjust the roughness for us. Let Eevee kind of restart. Okay, now the metal has a different shiny roughness than the paint of the actual airplane. So that was actually, that was a lot of setup to get this to paint exactly how we want it. Like right now we can start painting scratches, you know, and it's painting real time. It's pretty cool. But this color is not what I want to do. This brush is not what I want to do. I want to use a texture. So let's erase that. And let's just go grab a texture in the tool settings. Let's go down to texture. I think it's just texture. Yeah, maybe texture mask. Can't remember now. Let's try this one. We'll use a stencil, and let's open up an image. We'll click new and call it stencil. And then we need to find that image over here in the brush. Grab our stencil and go open a file. Where do I have it? Textures, CC, source. Is it grime? Just trying to find a general scratch texture. Is it this one? No, it's this one, scratches. I like this one a lot. All right, so what we can do is, you can see the stencil right here, but it's mostly gray. So I need to adjust the colors. Let's increase the brightness and, well, the contrast first. I think this is the one I like to use. Colors. Increase the contrast. Significant. What? There we go. And the brightness. All right, so now that I've got that, you can see in the stencil that we can start painting scratches like this. All right, so let me paint a white color. All right, maybe it wasn't, maybe it's not texture mask. Let's clear that and go to texture, stencil. Okay, there we go. Oh, save, 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 image, save all images. Thank you. Thank you for having my back. Whew, we dodged a bullet. All right, this is not, you can see the texture, or the scratches start to be added, but I feel like it's not exactly what I want. So let's go back to, where's the stencil? Oh, it's set. Okay, that's why. I'm looking for stencil. That's what I want. Okay. Yes, this is more what I'm looking for. So this is where it gets fun because I'm actually painting. You can see how it reflects differently. Actually painting scratches, literally in real time scratching off the paint, and the metal is, the bare metal underneath is what's left. Is this being mirrored to the other side? No, it's not. Might be a good idea to turn on mirroring just to get a little more out of it. So you don't have to do quite as much work. You'll have to turn it off once you get to the seam in the middle, but it's not too big of a deal. And what is my, I can't remember what my options are. Okay, I have backface culling and stuff turned on. And just, yeah, painting out scratches. I find this to be extremely fun. You can't quite notice it down here. Maybe I'll increase the size of the scratch. Okay, now it's starting to show up a little bit better. Looks like some of my values might have been less than ideal. So yeah, this part's really fun. This is, honestly, this is like the climax of the workflow in my opinion, being able to scratch off the paint. Similarly, I guess, like I enjoy painting grime, like in real time as well, because you can, as you paint, you diminish the reflection, you darken the color, and all of that works really well together. Oh, I need to put some on the airplane wing as well. Yeah, this part's fun. But you probably get the idea by now. There's a question from Omar. Does it look the same with cycles if you suddenly switch? That's a great question. Recently, it is a lot closer. So if I image save all images, Control S, it should look very, very similar. What I would need to be a true comparison, like right now we're using the built-in, in the LookDev Eevee stuff, we're using the built-in HDRIs. But if I choose Scene World, all right, you can see that. And then if I switch to cycles, very, very similar, extremely similar. Aside from the crashes, the texture painting does look fun. Yes, again, the version from May 6th was a lot more stable. So I mentioned I'm working on a project with Wayne. We have stuck to 2.8 from May 6th because it's more stable and more reliable. But once it's all done and working well, like 2.8's officially been released, I can only imagine it's going to be very stable, very solid. And it is a fun process. It really is. I mean, how much time is left? About 10 minutes. Yeah, I don't have a lot of time. The crashes threw me off a little bit. But the only other really thing I wanted to show you is like painting the grime and doing that in real time. So instead of scratches, adding grime, and that's a fun process. But you have seen like the core of the workflow and how it works in Eevee. A lot of this is also practice for the fundamentals of texturing and shading courses coming up that we are creating to launch the same time as 2.8 when it launches. So this is practice for that. It should be, again, much more stable and rock solid by that point. But yeah, I think if you have any last questions, I don't want to risk any more crashing, and I'll just save it at this. And I will update the final file with textures on this page if you want to take a look at it, the finished version. I'm with Aaron. Not going to complain if you want to go over that 2 hours personally. Okay. All right, well then maybe I will. Never use stencils. All right, well, yeah, I don't. If you want to stick around, you're welcome to. Yeah, for sure. We'll keep going, and I personally won't go too far past the 2 hour mark, but I want to paint the grime. That's going to be my goal. I want to paint the grime. Maybe paint scratches on the front too, on the propeller here. Only thing I wish was possible is texture painting on multiple objects. I don't think that is possible. Yeah, I think it only texture paints on the active object. So I do kind of wish that that wasn't the case. You know, it's a cool thing with edit mode, but I wish it was true here too. I should turn off symmetry, because on the propeller, on the prop, I think that's technically what this thing's called still. I don't know what the red thing is called. I know the propellers are called the props, but anyway, I'm just going to add some scratches to this to fill out the context a bit. And putting scratches in general on the surface, I think, is a good touch, but concentrating it a bit more towards the front makes logical sense, in my opinion. No. It's not working overtime. That's not how I see it, but like, I just don't want to, I don't want to be doing this if it's boring people, I guess. I'm pretty sensitive to that personally. Like if what I'm doing is boring to you, that would just, that sucks. I don't want that to be the case. But if you want to stick around longer, I will absolutely do this. All right, so I think that's good for scratches for now. I don't really like the HDRI that I picked so much. I'm going to go back to the look dev. I think it looks a little better, a little more readable here. Yeah, it's looking nice. So let's take the same concept and now switch over to painting grime. Control S, save the scene, image, save as, save all images. All right, so the same thing with the grime. We have to do a little bit of setup first. And there's not really a texture slot, I don't think, devoted to this specifically. Let's take a look. Yeah, and I suppose that doesn't really matter. So let's just add another one and call it base color, or roughness rather, or specular. Let's call it specular. Let's just go with that. Plain paint. The actual name will be grime, 4096 by 4096, and the color will be. For grime, the default will be black again. All right, so we're going to be painting on the grime, therefore white is on. All right, so we will create this. No alpha, that's fine. Okay, so, wait, what happened? Where's it plugged into now? Oh, that's right, it's black, and so that's why we lost all of our reflections. However, that's not really what I'm trying to set up. Instead, what I'm trying to do, let's think about what grime interacts with. Grime affects the color. It darkens the color. It also diminishes the reflection. Okay, so those are the two components that we're going to be affecting. So this map instead will be a mix. I'm looking at the reflection now, the specular. It's going to affect... Oh, it also needs to affect the roughness. It needs to increase that value. So let's go one by one. For specular by itself, the black value needs to remain what it was before I plugged it in. So that's 0.5, and the default is 0.5. The white value will need to be lower, right? So we're going lower into the dark spectrum. So let's just say for now that when I paint this map, let's add white. Are we getting an effect? I don't seem to be getting an effect. Specular. Let's look at the plain grime. Oh, I'm not painting on the right object. Okay, let's is that working? Oh, I've got the stencil as well. Geez. Okay, let's turn off stencil. We don't want texture. We don't want this. Oh, could we use it? Let's go ahead and use it. Let's go ahead and use it. Why not? All right, so we paint that on. Ah, you can barely see it. Let's change the texture out. All right, instead of using the scratch texture, let's where are my image settings for this? All right, let's go back to 1.1. All right, and then choose a different image. Choose a grimy, kind of gross thing. How about this? All right. But I need it to be black and white, I think. Yeah, I need it to be black and white. So maybe, oh, this is where I use the texture, not texture brush, but texture mask, I think. Is this where I use it? Yeah. You can see it down there, right? So that's the kind of grime texture that we're painting in here. All right, cool. So we can see that it is affecting. Okay, we can see that it is affecting the reflectivity. It's not so reflective in these parts, but we need it to affect more than that. We need it to darken the color as well. All right, so we will duplicate this mix node, and it will be, this texture will be used as a factor for the black color. Do we see that? Oh, that's right. I painted it out. Good gracious. Okay, so now we see it. It's not only darkening the reflections, like dimming the reflections, but also painting the color darker. All right, we'll get there. We'll get there eventually. But I mean, can you kind of see what I mean? That like this could be more intuitive. I know it could be more intuitive from bouncing around to different places. I know this could be more intuitive. In other words, if any developer in the community wanted to make a Substance Painter-esque experience, I think it's wide open, ready for someone to do that. Anyway, all right, let's, I think I've got it set up for now. I can start painting a bit, and then we can come back to adjusting the shader. But with my brush settings, I want a different fall off. I want it to be softer. Where is fall off? Where is fall off? Okay, great. Yeah. So now I can start painting the grime in this crevice. That's going to be fun. Also around the wheel, the propeller, like darken that, give it a little bit of like stretch back. That totally made that up. But you know, like the plane's moving really fast through the air, so like the grime is gonna like project backwards along the path of movement, I guess. Ooh. There's some funkiness. But wow, so much more dimension. You see how cool that is? That is so much fun to paint. And doing it real time as well. Love that. But we can also, if we want to be really thorough, we can duplicate another color mix for this texture to influence the roughness value. And what we would do is be adding it. Actually, we don't need another color mix. We can just add it over here with another color mix, sorry. Shift D, duplicate this, and change it to, what I meant is we didn't need a separate color mix. Instead, I can just add this value, add, and then we can control exactly how much. All right, you can see where that's being added. All right, the higher we go, the more rough it's going to be. All right, so we can see a really steep fall off, a really steep transition. So let's turn off factor. There we go. Turn down factor. Nice. All right, so that grime is doing a lot of work for us now. I like it. Let's switch over to the other object, save all images. And go back to this guy. Yeah, I really do like doing this real time now. And Eevee makes that possible. He kind of saved all images. All right, save the scene, save all images. You guys are awesome. So if you don't, if someone just started watching now, they could look at Blender and be like, whoa, that's super cool. It reminds me of like Substance Painter when you see those demo clips of like, he's painting grime directly on there and it's affecting all those channels. And that's pretty neat. But if you've watched from the beginning, you realize like there's been a lot of setup. It's been a very manual process to get here. And so I would love it if that workflow could improve. So yeah, this was the last thing I wanted to show you. Very, very fun. Let's see. Are there any other questions? But yeah, this was the meat and potatoes I wanted to get here. I'm glad we did. But yeah, once you get everything set up and you get used to the workflow, it is quite powerful. But yeah, I just barely went over the the 2 hour mark. Save all images, Control S, save the scene. And yeah, all that's left to do is be more thorough and apply this stuff to the rest of the fuselage. I did forget to add the colors, like the little symbols. Didn't forget, just didn't get there. But yeah, all of the things I wanted you to learn from it, I think I've taught. There hasn't been a crash. Yeah, that's true. Maybe gradients was part of the problem. Yeah, I wonder. That's a good question. But yeah, it's very nice when it doesn't crash. Thank you guys for watching. A question from Omar. Do you know if the CG Cookie website gallery lowers the resolutions on your upload images? I've suspected that it does, but I can't say for sure. For sure. Well, let me see something. If I go to create an whoops. If I go to upload a project, description, yeah, so it doesn't, let me do a test. I think it says upload an image. It at least 2 megabyte in size. So yeah, it doesn't really say that it automatically scales down. I don't know. I don't know. I would ask Wes maybe next time you see him. I'll try and remember, but you know, if he pops into a chat again, ask him. He would know. I suspect that it does. I suspect that it does because we get a ton of images and we don't have infinite like storage space. Also a bit random. Custom cropped thumbnails would be great. Yeah, I know what you mean. Like an art station, that is very nice. I feel there's a lot of difference in my heli renders in ArtStation than in CG Cookie. Yeah, that very well might be true. Anyway, I'm going to let you guys go. Thanks for watching. I apologize for the crashes. Was not quite as smooth of an experience, but if you just glimpsed the potential with texture painting this way, with Eevee, making textures work with materials in real time, that is a very bright future for us, and that's really all I wanted you to take away. But thanks for sticking with me this long. I appreciate it, and I will see you. I don't know if I have another stream scheduled right now, but sometime soon. I think Lampel has you next week. But have a good rest of your Tuesday, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.